Welcome to the Infinite and Beyond MIT Alumni Show. I'm Rob Kalwarowsky, class of 2010, executive coach, author, and speaker. Business pressure, competitive threats, artificial intelligence, political upheavals. Chaos is all around us. But inside the uncertainty, disruption, and unpredictability, a powerful self-leadership strategy is transforming people and organizations. Are you ready to capitalize on chaos? I have something exciting to tell you about. As part of my book launch, Capitalizing on Chaos, I will be in cities across the United States and Canada to speak and do book signings. And here are a few upcoming public events. August 21st, I'll be at the Frontier Tower in San Francisco. August 24th, I'll be at the MIT Club of Southern California in Los Angeles. October 21st, I'll be doing the MIT Club in Boston. And October 27th and 28th, I'll be at the Real Finance and Mental Health Summit in New York City. So if you're in any of these cities and either your company or you want to attend the event, I will be putting the links as soon as I have them. In addition to San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, and New York City, I will also be in Seattle, Portland, Atlanta, Houston, Ottawa, Edmonton, and Vancouver. And so if you're based in these cities and you know any groups, or if your company's interested in a talk and a book signing, let me know. Send me a note, rob@robkalwarowsky.com, and we can chat about it. Thank you so much for your support. And here's the rest of the episode. Welcome to the MIT Alumni Show, the Infinite and Beyond. And of course, we have another special guest, a 2011 Course 2, Eric Roselli is with us, and he's the co-founder of ZaiNar. Eric, how are you?
Doing great, Rob. Good to see you again. Excited to be here, coming live from California.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining the show. And Eric, of course, you know we ask this to all our guests, but can you share your journey from MIT to where you are today?
Yes. I like to start a little bit before the end of MIT. In my junior summer, I was able to take an internship at General Motors in summer of 2010. I got that internship from an MIT alumni who came to the General Motors came to the MIT career fair. Now, it's an interesting part of my journey, and I like to tell it because if anyone here watching remembers 2010 wasn't necessarily the most vigorous hiring time for General Motors. So going there in that summer post, this is kind of 2 years post bankruptcy, was really, really interesting. I got to go work a summer. I worked in body structures and worked for a very cool manager that got me to know engineering and got to know the company. And that ended up I ended up accepting a return offer to move to Detroit in 2011 after MIT. So my professional career started in 2011 at General Motors. It was a really formative start for me. When I went back to start full time, I got to work.
Just before you continue, folks, I remember seeing this on LinkedIn, but Eric was driving a Corvette at the time, and I was mad jealous. Go ahead.
Yes. I'm so glad you remember that because that was actually a big moment of, I feel like, that job. There was one career fair where I actually drove a car back to MIT and, had it on campus and had a Corvette there to show everybody. So that was cool. And so exactly. So when I went back to start full time, I got to work on that Corvette team. And, I don't know if I realized it at the time, but such an important part of my journey starting there. What ended up happening for me was starting my engineering journey inside of a large company, obviously a lot of history. And because I got to work on that team with the Corvette team, it was a product that was so exciting for me. If Rob, you may remember, car geek, always had multiple cars parked around back my house that I lived at and over there in Back Bay and always tinkering on stuff. So it was a really big part. In addition to that, I think for me, coming in very excited and young, I put my hand up and I asked to do everything. So I got to go to car shows, got to go to races, got to talk to engineers that weren't in my group and do that stuff. And then probably most importantly in that, worked in the engineering headquarters designing parts and doing the engineering, what's called a design release engineering job, which any of our engineering friends will know, but that really is, you don't exactly draw the part out from scratch and you don't stamp the part in the factory. You do everything in between there to make it essentially be production ready for manufacturing ready. So as part of that role, about halfway through my time at GM, I moved down to Bowling Green, Kentucky to work on the launch of the Corvette. That was probably one of the best things that I did with my engineering degree, my mechanical engineering degree, was go into an assembly plant, see how it was working, see how the machines were operating, and, just kind of see how the whole flow worked. How do you take apart from metaphorical paper, our engineering drawings in CAD, and take them all the way through the process? And then going to the customer shows, and I don't know that I appreciated this at the time, but going to the customer shows, that's really the full side of the loop. Like, where does your drawing, your picture, your image, your design end up in customer hands, and how do they use it? So that started my first full-time career. The other thing that job did for me was gave me a new goal. And I think starting at General Motors at a large company and starting in that role, I realized, oh my gosh, there's a lot more that's happening here besides, like, I'm a mechie and I design parts. There's a company here. There's suppliers. There's plants from around, we have suppliers from international destinations. We have local suppliers. We have different states. And then we have the entire economy around this product and company that has to make everything move. So it's a long way of saying that I eventually decided to apply to business school. In 2015, started at GSB, the Graduate School of Business at Stanford, which was another formative experience for me. And Stanford was, a lot of people go to business school, I think, especially coming from MIT as engineers, to do a pivot. And they say, or you'll hear the common sentiment that I want to go there and do something new or change. I wasn't sure about that. When I went to school, part of me thought maybe I'll come back to General Motors in Michigan. Part of me thought I'll stay in automotive, but it ended up being essentially a pivot. And so what happened at GSB is I met my 5 co-founders, 2 other GSB classmates, 1 GSB lecturer at the time, who's still with us. And then we had 2 PhDs from essentially for different programs at Stanford, but we co-founded a company called ZaiNar. And ZaiNar is what I'm working on now. Rob, we've talked about this last time a little bit when we spoke. But ZaiNar is a 3D location company. We track the location of anything with a radio signal. So that's phones, drones, IoT devices. And we do that across Wi-Fi that can be over 5G. And essentially anything that has a radio network that's propagating wireless signals, we can track it. And yeah, it's been, it's funny because there's those first 2 steps, and then it was ZaiNar, and that was 8 years ago. It's a very exciting summer here. We're in our 8th year. We've grown to over 50 people. We've got customers in Asia, Europe, and nothing's done yet. We're still very much building it, raising money, and developing even new prototypes. But that's where I've ended up, and that's how I got here.
That's so cool. And yeah, it's a different world, right? Like corporate company, big company, you see the one side, and then now as an entrepreneur with a team of 50, you see completely the opposite. But also a lot of it, what I find with a lot of founders that haven't worked with big corporate, is they don't understand some of the things you need, like processes and repeatability and roles, and like managing some of these things, and that holds them back. But obviously you have that, so it's very helpful.
Well, Ra, it's such a poignant thing right now because 8 years in, I spent a lot of time discussing at the very beginning of the company. Oh, Eric, you've brought in maybe knowledge from a larger company. That's a different way of doing things. That these are processes that add bureaucracy, and those are valid comments. Like, there's no point spending time, in my opinion, in year 1 building out those.
That's right.
But we're at this point now. You hit a head count of 50. You have customers that have contracts and are waiting on deadlines, and you have real, money on the line. We're at that point now. We're reintroducing some of that stuff I saw from the other side, and of course got formalized at business school because that's part of that process there. We are now very much implementing here, and you see the value in that.
Well, so Eric, you have been skilling a lot lately, and you mentioned that you were looking to hire some folks. And of course, since our demo is MIT, they're all brilliant folks out there. So do you want to let us know, like, who are you looking to hire, and what are you building now?
Yeah, definitely. So first caveat is, you've heard me say, I was a mechanical engineer, and now I'm like kind of a radio engineer. I have much better radio engineers that work with me. So if anyone's interested in what I've said so far, come on and talk. But what we are working on building out right now, and we already have engineers working on it, is we're always looking for anybody that works in 5G, cell networks, anybody that's worked with cell network hardware. That means the radio heads that we all see around us in the world. or possibly even the user end devices if they've dealt with those devices connections. And we're also looking for Wi-Fi engineers, wireless propagation engineers. And then, as I've said, 50 people, we're growing the business, raising more money. Great business operators, great product managers. We have a product manager position open right now. ZaiNarTech.com has the listings. So head on over there and check them out. But anybody who's interested in talking, if you think you might have an interest, you can find me. Rob, I'm sure will have my information. So that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, so obviously we'll drop Eric's LinkedIn in the podcast notes, or you can reach out to me and I'll connect you. And then, as Eric mentioned, the job posting ZaiNar Tech, so ZaiNar Tech TCH.com. So also in the podcast notes, you can find it there. Now, Eric, like you mentioned, the 3D tracking of assets. Like, what kind of companies would this be helpful for?
Yeah, great question. We've developed something very early on at the company called the Customer Advisory Board. So anytime we talk to a customer that might have a need, we record that need, and then we try to keep them updated. We've found the biggest needs in the first go-to-markets in construction and supply chain, although I think the applications are much more broad than that. So let me just give an example of kind of what happens with an asset in construction as a setup. So Rob, you've heard me talk to traveling to Japan for Japanese construction companies. What a company like that might use our technology for is knowing where people and things are on the site. If they know where people and things are, they can do a bunch of different things. So we see, with people, things like efficiency tracking, safety tracking, making sure people aren't in red zone areas that are designated as unsafe during those moments. It's tracking where different subcontractors are throughout the day. Most subcontractors have assigned work zones. And then on the equipment side, that can be everything from utilization, also safety. Cranes and things have special safety red zones, up to other things like workplace footprint. For example, a lot of these companies, and in supply chain, I'd say most of these are pretty much analogous. Most of these companies are doing what's called baselining and preparing for automation, which is, how do you look at a footprint? How does a footprint move throughout the day? How would you change an assembly line to make the process more efficient, safer, whatever that might be? So those are the types of things we do. More broadly, you can open your phone today, Rob, and look at location and see what it does for you. That can be location-based advertising based on what store you're in, what shelf you're at. There's obviously location services for emergency services. And then there's a broad suite of other, I think, as the connected world grows and IoT devices just start to I shouldn't say start.
They've already done it.
Right. Continue to ride that curve. We know that it only happens when there's a little caret and a small number above the other number, right? Big like that. Only with the increasing, supply of those devices, I think location and connectivity is going to be more important than ever for the next decades of technology.
I totally agree. I mean, obviously, like I worked 10 years in heavy industry, and in mining, a lot of the mobile equipment has it, but not a lot of the other stuff. And so, like, I remember a time where we went out to try to find a wheel motor, which costs $1.2 million, at least at the time. And it is the size of a car, but we had to drive around to try to find where they are and how many we had. And then another story, at one of the last companies I worked for, obviously it was a pipeline company. So they have these big storage tanks, and they didn't know how many they had. And so the guy in IT actually went on Google Earth and looked down and counted them, because they're so large that you can count them. But obviously, if you had tracking technology, this would be much easier to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's wildly like something that folks should think about, especially if you're in industries like that, or even, as you mentioned, Eric, like the granularity and where people are going. The future is
Yeah, and the audience should know, Rob, I did not talk to you about this before this episode, but that what you're describing is exactly what our customers tell us. When we meet with them all the time, they say exactly what you said. And these are customers that have, I mean, this is what they do. They have a good command of their space, of their work site, of their job site, whatever it is. They know where things are and how the processes work. But that being said, we all know how it is managing anything like that. If you're looking for stuff, losing things, it happens all the time. I mean, we start running the numbers on some of the, like you're saying, what it costs to down, like that part that you mentioned, that wheel motor, what it costs, the downtime and not replacing that and looking for it is just immense on some. I mean, mining is a great example of a use case. So
yeah,
very good.
these are the crazy numbers, like millions, billions, easily hundreds of millions. So yeah, totally on board with that. Now, Eric, like You mentioned at GM you did some really incredible stuff in terms of networking with other departments and going to saying yes to everything and like really building your strategy there. Can you talk about some of your learnings over your career about how do you either grow in a corporate, but also how do you lead as an executive, as a founder now?
Definitely. GM was such a special experience for me because of those people around me. I mean, going on now at 15 or towards 20 years in my career, I can comfortably say like one of my biggest learnings is just how much the people of a business really drive the business. And you hear speakers on stage say that, but I just think it's true. My time at GM gave me role models to look up to. So it's a big company. You get a large variety of managers in both skill and ability and style and the way that might happen. And so starting there helped me see what's the possibility. What does it feel like to have a really good manager? What's it feel like to, have an executive that's difficult to deal with? And when I've at ZaiNar, my experience has been kind of on the other side, hiring more and stuff. And my learning there has just been these people that you will hire or work with throughout the years, they'll be putting their life force into the company. They'll be sharing their life moments with you. That means ups and downs, by the way, and they'll share the successes of the business with you. So it's just shocking to me. Every time we hire someone, it's a stranger. They come in, I don't know who they are. And then it seems like 6 months later, I felt like I didn't know them. And then 2 years later, working with them, they're my closest work. Like I can bounce ideas off them and share like a problem I'm having in life. So that's been probably for me the far and above. And MIT is about community in a lot of ways. And that was really important for me. And so is Stanford. And so it's been something that's always kind of been chirped around and you kind of hear, but it's become something very central to me. And so what that means for me in my day-to-day operation, and especially at ZaiNar with like business, is every hiring decision, every decision we make about somebody at work has a lot of importance to me, and I consider it carefully because that's your human resources, the old word, right? That's the capital. That's the people that really matter to me. Also, I would say the interesting thing is starting a business, I think, coming from MIT as an engineering mindset, and then starting this business has taught me about how the economy works.
Yeah.
How does money flow? What drives innovation? What drives research? What drives investment? And that's been like a lot of people might say, like at business school, I learned some of the academic material around this and set up the mindset around it. But starting a business has taught me how does any of this thing that we're all doing work? And what does it take to actually sustain something over time? You hear a lot of startups talk about, let's get the cash flow positive. Well, what does that mean? That means that you've got cash coming in to sustain a business. And especially in the Valley, a lot of us exist in what's called the venture capital world, which people know too. And that's a different type of raising money. But just even the difference between these types of funding vehicles and how you get things done, I feel that I'm still learning. And my biggest goal with ZaiNar and after business school was to simply learn how to start a business and just to learn what it meant. And very early on, that's what's kept me motivated more than anything throughout this time is that I'm still learning every day with that. And learning from the people we hire. So those are some of the things I've learned.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, there's a lot to starting a business that's more than, the $1,000 it takes to basically incorporate.
Right.
And then you're totally right. Everybody, like every CEO, I mean, for the most part, says like people are our most important asset and people are this. And then, they're saying that while laying off thousands of people and cost cutting and cutting training and all these things. And it's really living that matters because it's not about those big quote unquote moments where you're on TV. It's also about the daily action. And that's what builds trust and builds those teams. And I mean, we see folks all the time who aren't living in accordance to that and what happens to their businesses.
Yeah.
I'm a fan, of course.
Yeah. And that's what I would say to you, especially younger people, starting your career out of MIT. Like one thing you mentioned there is like, let's say you're a manager earlier in your career. What you're able to do, with like resources and resource constraints, whether it's training or perks, there's always going to be constraints on that. And so that's one aspect. I think the aspect really that is that's more important to me is regardless of any of that or resource constraint, you can still treat like I try to treat everybody at work that like I feel is that they're important, and anything that they might be going through in life, of course, affects them. So it affects the business, and that affects me, and it affects me because I know them anyways. And so even if you see that at GM too, because GM was a classic place to start where there was no, the reason I mentioned going to General Motors in 2010 and 11 versus 2010, 2011 was a pretty exciting time where I am now in Silicon Valley. So I went to an office with no free perks, no free meals, no free coffee and stuff, but still had a broad experience of people who cared about me. So yeah.
So like Gallup backs this up with their engagement, right? So like almost every year, Gallup reports an engagement number around 20%, right? Give or take a percentage or two, which really means that 2 people out of 10 on your team, or 20 people out of 100, are actually giving their all to the work. And there's roughly 60% of folks who are just kind of like doing the minimum, the quiet quitting, or like that's what they're calling it these days. And there's 20% roughly who are actively working against your corporate goals. So those are called actively disengaged by Gallup, but basically they're like mad. And so they like will sabotage or slow things down on purpose. They'll talk like, they'll talk negatively about your company or to the other folks, right? But when you're talking about engagement, like what are the leadership behaviors that drive engagement? It's really like having a caring manager is number one, but it's small things. It's like giving feedback. It's like growing them in their career. It's basically like the quote that they have at the end of that article is like, people want a manager who's like a coach. And so it doesn't take money to do those things. Like, yeah, of course, if you want to send them to like training and stuff, it does. But a lot of it's like, hey, Eric, where do you want to be in 5 years? Oh, you want to like get promoted into the project management group. Great. Like maybe you can run part of this project that we're coming up, right? Doesn't cost you anything, but it's like something that you can do as a manager versus, oh, you want to be an individual contributor. Okay, let's specialize in what do you want to specialize in?
Yep.
Right. And so
Definitely.
it's free.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of those benefits, I think, again, they can come from just personal interaction and understanding who you're working with. Like take the time, take the time to talk to people.
Absolutely. So, Eric, of course, my book, Capitalizing on Chaos, is going to be published August 18th. And so I have to ask
Very
you.
excited. Very, very excited, Rob.
Absolutely. So I have to ask you, how are you navigating the chaos in this world? Because literally, according to the World Uncertainty Index, this is an unprecedented time of chaos. And so obviously we're seeing it economically, politically, even in technology. Like, how are you navigating this time?
I love that question. I mean, it's something I thought about when we were talking before about MIT and what it's meant and these alumni programs. My grounding force is lifelong learning through this stuff. And I think that's something I almost took it for granted, I think, at MIT, because at MIT, that's almost like cost of entry. You hear people talk about it, everybody has the experience, or at least I had it a lot of times, and I know many people have, where you run into that MIT professor. I had a couple that they've been teaching for decades. These are older professors, tenured, they've been around, and yet they have an excitement for the world and awe of the world that is just youthful. And it comes with kind of funny characteristics where like these types of professors, or even not just professors, it's other people you meet at MIT, academics, or anybody in the community that's been around. They're up to date on things. Like, some of us, we might have experience with our parents or older people in the world where you say something and they don't know. But I think even for me at our kind of early mid-career stage, continuing to learn, staying grounded in what are fundamentals. There's a lot of talk today about what's truth, what's facts. Like in our world of engineering and stuff, that's a lot more simple. Not there's actually we don't even it's not really even about facts. It's just kind of about what we've observed and how those observations stack up to give us an understanding over time. And so I I wasn't even like a nerdy reader really at MIT. I would do my classes and do my technical work, but now I've just become I get so much comfort and like I was saying, grounding in this uncertain time by taking myself back and saying, hey, there's something weird going on with something in the world. Let me read the news articles first, then read a couple more things about it. Then, by the way, another thing is community. And why don't I take what I think I've learned and talk to Rob on the phone for 10 minutes and say, hey, that thing that's going on, how do you feel about it? And that type of socialization, community, leaning into learning really, really helps me.
Yeah, I'm not much of a reader, although I
Mm.
listen to audiobooks and podcasts, but this is why I love hosting a show. Because
Yeah.
you can have people on, you can ask them whatever questions you want, and then you can learn from them.
Yo, and let me be clear, Rob. I don't want to come off like some sort of reading snob because a lot, you got to be a little bit careful. Everybody knows about content and YouTube and pipelines, but in the face of all that, which again, education will help you navigate those pipelines. In the face of all that, whether it's audiobooks or podcasts or an interesting conversation, you can learn a lot of ways. You can learn from a YouTube video and it may be 20% inaccurate, but if you're an educated person, you go, okay, there's some inaccuracies for whatever reason, incentives or something, but I can still take something from this and learn.
Now, Eric, you mentioned community and the MIT community, and part of this show is about community. So, how would you like to support the rest of our MIT community in achieving their goals?
Yeah, I mean, quick answer, any way I can. So I'm out here in California. Our company's in Belmont, California. So first thing I'd say is I'm a pretty active member of the MIT alumni community here. So there's events in the Bay Area. But first thing I'd say is anybody wants to chat, come out to the office, give you a live demo of our tech. But we don't have to talk about ZaiNar. We can talk about MIT or anything else. But also just, you've heard, at least if in this show, some of the things I'm working on can help anybody that's working in 5G, wireless propagation, or just business. If anyone's thinking about going to business school or went to business school and wants to start a business, I would love to just talk and just re-engage. I will say this now, Rob, for the audience. I took a lot of inspiration from you and your classmates for 2010 this year for the 15-year reunion and seeing the excitement that the 2010s. I have a lot of good 2010 friends from my friend group as well,
That's
as you
right.
know. That type of like re-engagement with community, if I can help just by like learning and reaching out, I'm here. And I'll be doing the same to others that I hear from on your show too, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, like we owe it a lot to Camo who put in the work, but um, our reunion, I mean, I think it was close to 250 people, and so it was really cool to see everyone and chat
Fantastic.
and do, so a bunch of folks spoke, and yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. That type of those like get together, come together again and feel that energy. I mean, we talked about it when we spoke the first time. It's like I hadn't talked to you in a few years and suddenly it's like, oh yeah, remember this and that. So yeah, I'm here to help. Like I said, I've tried to do my job and I checked that box in Infinite Connection. So I'm open for contact like alumni. So find me and reach out.
Awesome. Eric, what's your biggest goal and how can we support you?
Right now, I'm really focused on building ZaiNar. So if you can talk about the world of location, the world of wireless propagation, this world of bandwidth that we're going into with increasing 5G usage. By the way, 5G is going to be competing with satellites, and satellites are going to be competing with who knows what. So I would just love to hear from industry people. Even within MIT already, I've connected with a pretty good space community out here. I think you know a few of the founders in that group. So yeah, that my goal right now is to build ZaiNar to be as big as it can be, make the technology become as widespread as it can be, um, and really continue on this journey, which I still feel like I'm at the beginning of, but hopefully in the middle of building a successful, sustainable, long-term business.
Yeah, it's an always continuing journey.
Yeah, it never stops, does it?
No, I think if you think you've made it, it's just like learning. It's like if you think you've made it, you've gotten ahead of your skis, you know? It's like you
Oh
got to
yeah,
keep going back, and it's not necessarily you have to change everything, but it's like continuing to learn and continuing to grow.
yeah, and I like that. And I think the more you do of it, the more you stay sort of moving forward, the more natural it becomes, and it becomes less effort actually.
Oh, totally. So, folks out there, so Eric's LinkedIn is in the podcast notes, so you can connect with him there. Obviously, if you're checking out jobs or you want to check out ZaiNar, go to ZaiNar tech.com. Also in the podcast notes, you can find it there. Is there any wisdom do you want to leave us with today, Eric?
Oh, wisdom, I don't know, but just a sincere thank you, Rob, and I guess really just a thank you to the community. When I was sitting down thinking about this, and like I already mentioned, the 2010s last year, I'm excited for our 15-year, and I still see a ton of friends from my community at MIT and the community we built out here. So I don't know if it's wisdom, but build those communities, keep learning, and yeah, let's stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to continue it more. Like I've mentioned it on the show a few times because I'm going to speak this into existence, but I am planning on retreats next year obviously in the beautiful Costa Rica. And so we're hoping to get some MIT folks down, potentially some Sloan folks down too. So we're going to make that happen.
That'd be great. Hey, count me in, Rob. Sign me up.
Awesome. We'll make that happen. Everybody out there, thank you so much for listening. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you next week.
My pleasure. Thanks, Rob.